It is weird, this Zoom thing. I'm just outside Bournemouth, and it's great that I can just stay in my little cabin here and speak to you in Wales. Um, so just to share my background, really, I didn't have a Christian upbringing. Couldn't help thinking, just as the children's talk was given, what an incredible privilege it is to be brought up from infancy, to hear the things of God, to know why we're here, and to know where we're going when we die. No greater thing, and no greater privilege in all of the world. But my parents were not Christians. They loved me, and so I had a happy upbringing. But they couldn't tell me what I needed to know most. That is, why am I here? And even kids, 3, 4, 5, ask, where will I go when I die? Death can haunt us from the youngest age. We want to know what happens when we die. So, in one sense, you get used to living without knowing the answers to those questions. And it's funny, when I was a kid, I was a happy kid, but I would never have dreamt that I'd have been an alcoholic by my mid 20s. But become one I did, and I didn't see it coming. Um, as I say, happy kid, brought up with parents who loved me. I'm from a long line of musicians. My dad was a professional musician. We were from up north of England, but my dad got a job in an orchestra, so we all moved down south into the Bournemouth area. So I went to school in the Bournemouth area, and I loved school probably for all the wrong reasons. I loved football, and I loved music. I learned to play the trombone at school, and I was in the band and the orchestra. So I gave loads and loads of time to those kind of things, and not a lot of time to the academic side, which I regret now. Um, but God was good, even though I didn't know him. And looking back now, I can see how kind he was in protecting me and guiding me. And I left school and went to work on the newspaper in the Bournemouth area, on the Bournemouth Echo. Just started as an office boy, doing the menial jobs like, making the tea and sending out the mail and stuff. But I did it well, and I got a promotion to a very good job, actually, where I got paid good money and even got a firm's car and lots of freedom. And I guess that's where the trouble started. Looking back, I got in with some heavy drinkers. Newspapers are pretty well known for, for those who drink heavily. And bit by bit, I began to drink with these guys. It was very, on a very controlled level at the beginning, just going once a week for a drink in the pub. And then I got in with heavy drinkers and began to drink more and more frequently, and the intake was going up all the time. Then I began to work as a musician. Played the trombone, as I said, at school, learned the trombone. I got a job in a band and got paid for it. I thought, this is good. And yet, even then, I started to gravitate towards the drinkers. I mean, there was something in me. My dad was a bit of a drinker, so I don't know if these things are genetic. Um, but I began to gravitate towards the heavy drinkers, even in the music business. At that time, there was a very attractive girl singer in the band which I played, called Gwen, and we got together. And I got to hurry this on. It's a long story. And we had kids, and yet I didn't settle down, and I began to drink more and more and more. So as time went by, I was just they call it diminished responsibility. With drink or drugs, you begin to disappear and be taken over by this substance. So for me, I drank. People drink for different reasons. For me, I just love the social side. Looking back again, I think it was because I just wanted to find out happiness, and who wants to be miserable? And I just thought this is the way to pursue it. But as the years went by, I didn't want to cross the line from becoming a heavy drinker to an alcoholic, but cross it I did. And I knew that I couldn't live without drink, as I was drinking morning, noon, and night, hardly seeing my family, letting people down all the time. And I guess from the age of 25 to 31, when things all changed, my life just went down and down and down. Even the police took my license off me for drunken driving. And my own newspaper printed the headline, "Newspaper man, 3.5 times over the limit." So all the warning signs were there. I remember getting my license back from the police. thinking, oh, I better try and change. I can't drink and drive, but within weeks, back to where I was before, just getting drunk day by day or night by night, falling paralytic into the car, and I could have killed people, not known about it. And so it was just a reckless, really reckless and ridiculous lifestyle, letting people down all the time, and you feel guilty, of course. It wasn't that I didn't love my wife or my kids, but you're controlled. In the end, you're controlled by this stuff. And so I knew I was going to die. I got to that point where I'd accepted that I would even die for drink. There was a grip, you see, there was a threefold grip on my life. I love the flavor of drink. I love being drunk. I love being with hooligan drunkards. So if you said to me, change, I would say, how could I change? What do I change to? I just couldn't see it wasn't a possibility. So I was prepared to die even for drink, even though I was, reckless and ruining the family that I loved and letting everybody down. I would try and piece, this was my life, trying to piece together what had happened the day before to make sense of it, and then find out, who do I need to apologize to? And then I'll get back on the drinking again. And so you just stifle, and that's what you do with a guilty conscience. You try and drown it out. So drink and drugs does that, allows you just to escape again. So there was no hope, really. I was a dying alcoholic, and yet things changed in an instant. Although looking back again, it wasn't that sudden. The turning point was this. A young guy came to work on the newspaper where I worked, who was a Christian, and his desk was slotted in right next to mine. And he was a young guy, and he was full of joy, and he had something which I couldn't define. He used to have a Bible on his desk, and I thought, this is little bit weird. But he liked football, and I thought, well, he can't be all that bad if he likes football. So we would chat about football and stuff, and but really, I did all I could to pull him down. Yet there was a power in him that was greater than me. And so bit by bit, I was hearing bits about Jesus Christ. And he was the editor of the magazine. He was in a Baptist church, and he was the editor of the youth magazine. So every month he would get me to check it for spelling mistakes. So I'd be reading this stuff all the time. And one thing that struck me, although I didn't realize at the time I was taking it on board, is that there was a one-frame cartoon about the return of Jesus Christ, that Jesus Christ is coming back to judge the world. And it was just a one-frame cartoon of a double-decker bus was pulling away. The destination on the front of the bus said, "The end of the world." And it was the old kind of bus where the conductor would stand on the back with the rail. And the guy was running for the bus, but the conductor had his hand up, and the caption simply said, "Too late." And so the whole theme was that if you were not saved, if you were not forgiven when Jesus Christ returned and judged, then you'd had it. And I remember thinking, that's me. If all this stuff is true, it's me. But didn't realize I was taking it on board. But bit by bit, I'd hear about Jesus. He would speak to different people about Jesus in the office, and I'd hear these things. And anyway, my life came to a greater crisis. I'd had another car crash while paralytic, hit some cars, hadn't stopped, another court case coming up. And for me, I guess it was the point where I realized I'm completely out of control. Now, I have to say this, I wasn't seeking God. I've got to say that I wasn't seeking God. But I found myself one day with this young guy in the office, very unusual day, September the 8th, 1979. It was a Saturday. I found myself asking him questions about his faith, not expecting an answer, not expecting, anything to change. But he turned around and said, "Mike, do you believe in God?" And I said, "Possibly. Who knows?" That was my philosophy. He said, "Mike, do you believe in Jesus Christ?" I remember thinking, that's 2,000 years ago. What's it got to do with me? But then he said, "Why don't you ask God to forgive your sin? Ask him to come into your life and take over." Now, there was something stirring within me. Looking back now, it was the Holy Spirit. It was God within me beginning to stir. Went out of the office, got down on my knees in a toilet in this loo, and I prayed the worst prayer ever. It was like, "God, in brackets, if you're there, help," that kind of prayer. Not expecting, what's going to happen. I, no idea. But came out. He was dying to know how I prayed, but I didn't tell him. Got into the car, drive home. It was gone 5 o'clock. I broke down in tears of joy. I knew it was all true. I knew there was a God. I knew he loved me. I knew that Jesus died for me. I knew if I crashed the car and die now, I'm not going to hell. I'm going to heaven. Just overwhelmed with joy. And I drove the car home. I flung the door open. My wife, Gwen, was in the kitchen. I said, Gwen, I become a Christian. And she said, oh, no. What's he up to now? Because she just thought, here he is again. Another one of his wild schemes, one of his lies. I said, I'm going to change. It's all going to be different now. Anyway, this went on, and she was just pushing it aside. But she could see over the days it was lasting. Now she's actually scared because she knows that something supernatural has changed her husband in a moment. But now he's talking about religion. He's talking about Jesus now. And he started going to church. And now what happened is, on the I think it was the Monday, that young guy, he bought me a Bible. And no, I might have looked a bit at the Bible at school and, boring, I couldn't put it down. It just came alive. It explained what had happened to me. If anyone is in Christ, that is, if anyone becomes a Christian, they're a new creation. The old has gone, the new has come. And then the Bible spoke about being born again. Jesus said, you must be born again. Oh, that's me. I'm a new person. I look the same, but I'm just changed inside. So anyway, I couldn't put this book down. This book captivated me. It told me why while we're alive. It tells us that we're made by God and for God. And when we die, there is a heaven, there is a hell, there is a judgment day. So really, the natural consequence was, if this is true, people need to hear. People need to know. So I began to speak to my wife. I said, Gwen, look at this. Now I probably wasn't the most tactful person. I began jumping out of cupboards and saying, Gwen, you're going to hell. Look at this. So she was so furious. You can understand, because she was the one holding the family together for years. All of a sudden, I'm the saint going to heaven. She's the sinner going to hell. So you can understand that this thing the Bible calls grace it is scandalous. And but you could see I've changed. But she's terrified and she's annoyed and she's doesn't understand it. And then she would say, Mike, you're not going to church again, are you? I said, well, yeah, Christians do that. She said, well, you went last week. Well, yeah, Christians go every week, when there's not COVID. But, why didn't you go to the pub, she would say. Go to the pub? Now, she hated me drinking, but at least you could understand that. But this religion thing, she didn't get at all. Anyway, this went on for 3 months. Rows. And now Gwen was a singer. Gwen worked in a band in the Pavilion Ballroom in Bournemouth, and they were in the band with the guys from that band. I was notorious, among the musicians, and the band were in the bar, and they were saying to Gwen, "What's happened to Mike? He's become one of these religious nutters, hasn't he?" Now, although Gwen would argue with me, she found herself defending me. And she said, I don't know what's happened to him, but he's become the husband I wanted. He's turning up for meals, he's kind, he plays with the kids. And anyway, they had a good laugh. And so if you ask me, Gwen, you'll become one of these Christians, and he'll become a minister. And they all hooted for laughter. Anyway, that night, Gwen's driving home. Now, Gwen had no Christian background like me, apart from, as a little girl, going to Sunday school for 6 weeks. And they learned about the life of Peter, the disciple who followed Jesus and denied Jesus. And they did a Sunday school quiz and then I think an exam at the end of it. Anyway, that's all she knew about Peter. When she's driving home late this night, thinking about what's happened to me, it's as though a voice said to her, Gwen, why are you denying me? And she began to think, well, why am I opposing this? If this is God, Mike changed for the better. And so anyway, it was 3 months after me that Gwen got down on her knees and asked the Lord to save her, to forgive her. Now, Gwen wasn't a person like me. She had no drink problem, but she was a sinner. The Bible says we all have sinned and fallen short. My sin was obvious. Most sins are not so obvious, but we all have sinned. We've all broken God's commandments. We all fail and need Jesus Christ to forgive us. Anyway, she was changed, and then she knows in an instant what's happened to me. And so we were new creations, and then our marriage was brand new. God restored us as a couple. And then our kids could see what had happened, and the impact upon the family, because Dad was actually, you know, teaching the Bible now. Anyway, that was 40 years ago, over 40 years ago. But God has kept me, and the joy of it still remains with me. And to bring this to a close, from that day I could do nothing but speak about Jesus, because if this is true, people need to hear. This is good news. You know, in a world full of fear and hopelessness and death and depression, here is someone who actually brings peace and forgives and gives hope. And that's why I'm here today. I'll be speaking in a minute about forgiveness, because that's what we all stand in need on. It's the greatest need that we have. So I could keep you for, you know, another 5 hours, just telling what's happening in the last 40 years, but I won't. So I'll hand over to, I've got to hand over to, and I'll speak to you later.